What if I told you that some of the most powerful historical fiction novels ever written are set not in Europe, not in America, but in Iran, ancient Persia, the land of empires, revolutions, poetry, and forbidden love? What if I told you that behind the headlines about modern Iran lies a literary landscape shaped by Zoroastrian fire temples, Safavid courts, Qajar princesses, Islamic revolutions, and whispered resistance inside family homes? Today, we are diving into the essential historical fiction books about Iran and Persia published in the last 25 years. Novels that explore Persian culture, Iranian history, women's voices, revolution, exile, identity, Persian language, and literary heritage. If you have ever searched best historical fiction about Iran, books set in Persia, Iranian historical novels, Persian culture novels, books about the Iranian Revolution, this episode is your complete literary guide. By the end of this podcast, you will not only have 10 powerful book recommendations, you'll understand how Iranian historical fiction preserves memory, language, resistance, and storytelling tradition in ways no history textbook ever could. So pour yourself some chai, and let's travel to Persia. And trust me, you're going to want to stay until the end. 1. The Blood of Flowers, Anita Amirizvani. Let's begin in 17th century, Safavid Iran, set in Isfahan during the reign of Shah Abbas. The Blood of Flowers by Anita Amirizvani is a lush historical fiction novel about Persian carpet weaving, court life, and survival within a patriarchal system. But here's the hook. This isn't just a story about rugs. It's about economic survival in Safavid Persia. The novel follows a young girl who becomes a master carpet designer in Isfahan, then one of the most culturally sophisticated cities in the world. Through her journey, we learn about Persian artistry, dowry systems, temporary marriage customs, courtly etiquette, and class mobility in early modern Iran. This book ranks highly for keywords like Persian historical fiction, Safavid Empire novels, books set in Isfahan, Iranian women in history fiction. What makes it essential is how it explores Persian craftsmanship as power. Carpet design becomes literacy, pattern becomes voice, color becomes survival. And here's the emotional hook. You don't just see Safavid Persia, you feel its textures. Stay with me, because the next book shifts us centuries forward to a forbidden love story during the Iranian Revolution. 2. The Stationery Shop of Tehran, Marjan Kamali. What if your first love vanished during a political coup? Set in 1953, Tehran during the CIA-backed coup against Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh. The Stationery Shop of Tehran blends romance with political upheaval. This novel is frequently searched under books about 1953, Iran coup, Iranian Revolution fiction, romantic historical fiction, Iran, Tehran historical novels. Through Roya and Bahman's love story, we witness how foreign intervention reshaped Iran's political future. The novel gently introduces readers to nationalist movements, political ideology, street protests, and the emotional toll of instability. But here's what makes it unforgettable: memory as resistance. This novel is about lost letters, missed connections, and the fragility of destiny during historical rupture. And if you've ever searched for books like The Kite Runner, but set in Iran, this is often the recommendation that appears. But now we move into something darker, because next we enter prison walls. 3. The Prisoner of Tehran, Marina Nemet. Although autobiographical in tone, this novelistic memoir reads like historical fiction, set during the early years after the 1979 Iranian Revolution. It follows a teenage girl imprisoned in Evin prison. High-ranking search terms connected to this book include Iranian Revolution novels, Evin prison stories, books about women in Iran, political historical fiction, Middle East. What makes this story powerful is not just imprisonment, it's moral complexity. It explores ideological indoctrination, survival through forced marriage, trauma, faith, and cultural contradiction in post-revolution Iran. But here's the deeper layer: language as survival. Persian poetry appears throughout Iranian literature, even inside prisons. Poetry is memory, poetry is identity. And this thread, Persian literary tradition woven into historical fiction, will return again and again in today's episode. Because you cannot discuss Iran without discussing poetry, which brings us to a novel rooted in myth and magic. If you're building your ultimate Persian historical fiction reading list, do not leave, because the next book might just become your new obsession. We've already walked through Safavid Isfahan, the 1953 Tehran coup, and the shadowed corridors of post-revolution prisons. But now we're stepping somewhere deeper. We're stepping into mythic Persia, into royal courts, into stories where history and legend blur so completely that you begin to question what is memory and what is myth. And trust me, if you've ever searched Persian mythology novels, books inspired by the Shahnameh, or best historical fiction set in ancient Persia, this next section is going to feel like literary treasure hunting. Let's continue. 4. Girl Serpent Thorn Melissa Bashardoust. Now here's the hook that might surprise you. Not all Persian historical fiction is strictly historical. Some of it reimagines Persian myth and folklore through fantasy layered over cultural memory. Girl Serpent Thorn by Melissa Bashardoust draws deeply from Persian mythology, Zoroastrian dualism, and the narrative rhythms of the Shahnameh, the Persian Book of Kings written by Ferdowsi over 1,000 years ago. This novel trends under keywords like Persian mythology retelling, Shahnameh-inspired fiction, Iranian folklore novels, Zoroastrian mythology books, set in a fictionalized Persian-inspired kingdom. The story follows Soria, a cursed princess whose touch is poisonous, but beneath the fantasy lies something far more historical: the tension between pre-Islamic Persian identity and evolving religious shifts. Zoroastrianism, once the dominant religion of ancient Persia under the Achaemenid and Sasanian empires, plays a subtle but powerful undercurrent in this novel. The book explores themes of exile, femininity, inherited shame, and political control, all central motifs in Persian storytelling tradition. Here's why it matters for historical fiction readers. Persian literature has always blended epic, allegory, myth, and politics. The Shahnameh itself is both mythological and historical. Kings, demons, warriors, destiny. This novel continues that tradition. And if you're building a list of modern novels inspired by Persian culture, this one is essential because it proves something powerful. Persian storytelling never really died. It just evolved, but now we're stepping back into strict historical realism and into the Qajar dynasty. 5. The Lion Women of Tehran, Marjan Kamali. If you want a novel that captures women's resistance in 20th century Iran, this is it. Set during the decades leading to and following the Iranian Revolution, The Lion Women of Tehran explores female friendship, political awakening, and cultural transformation. Frequently searched under books about Iranian women, Tehran historical fiction, Iran women's rights novels, Iranian feminist literature. This novel spans the 1960s through the revolutionary years of 1979, showing how social reforms, westernization under the Shah, and rising political unrest shaped daily life. What makes this book particularly significant is how it highlights education, journalism, and literature as forms of activism. We see how Tehran itself transforms, from cosmopolitan cafes and intellectual salons to streets filled with protest slogans. And here's something many Western readers don't realize. Before the revolution, Tehran was one of the most culturally vibrant cities in the Middle East. Cinema, poetry readings, universities, fashion, it was layered, complex, modern. This novel doesn't simplify history, it complicates it, and that complexity is what makes Iranian historical fiction so powerful. Because Iran's story is never one narrative. It is empire, it is monarchy, it is revolution, it is exile, it is poetry. And speaking of exile, our next book carries us into diaspora memory. 6. Song of a Captive Bird, Jasmine Darznik. Now we move into a story where literature itself becomes an act of rebellion. Song of a Captive Bird is a remarkable historical novel inspired by the real life of the groundbreaking Iranian poet Forugh Farrokhzad, one of the most influential voices in modern Persian literature. If you've ever searched for books about Iranian women writers, novels about Persian poetry, or historical fiction about Iranian feminism, set primarily in the 1950s and 1960s during the reign of the Shah, the novel follows Forugh as she grows from a restless young girl into a poet who challenges nearly every social rule placed upon Iranian women at the time. Here's the hook. This is not just a biography disguised as fiction. It's a literary portrait of a woman determined to claim her voice in a society that demanded silence. Through Darznik's storytelling, we see the vibrant cultural life of mid-20th century Tehran, its poetry circles, intellectual gatherings, film studios, and artistic rebellions. Persian poetry, which has always been central to Iranian culture, becomes both a refuge and a weapon. Forugh writes about desire, loneliness, independence, and female identity in ways that were considered shocking in conservative society. Her words ignite admiration, outrage, and fascination across Iran. And through this lens, the novel explores several themes that readers often look for when searching historical fiction about Iranian culture: the role of poetry in Persian society, the struggle for artistic freedom, the evolution of women's rights in Iran, and the tension between tradition and modernity during the late Pahlavi era. What makes Song of a Captive Bird especially powerful is how it portrays literature as survival. Forog's poetry becomes a space where personal truth can exist even when social constraints attempt to erase it. And that idea, that storytelling itself can challenge power, is one of the oldest traditions in Persian culture. From the epic verses of Ferdowsi to the lyrical ghazals of Hafez, Persian literature has always given voice to emotions and truths that politics could not contain. This novel reminds us that the history of Iran is not only written in revolutions and empires. Sometimes it is written in poems, and sometimes those poems change everything. Which brings us to our next novel, a story where the Iranian Revolution collides with the life of a Jewish family whose future is suddenly uncertain. 7. The Septembers of Shiraz, Dalia Sofer. If you've ever searched books about Jewish families in Iran, Iranian Revolution, historical fiction, Shiraz novels, Iranian diaspora stories, this novel likely appeared. Set during the 1979 Iranian Revolution, it follows a wealthy Jewish family in Tehran whose world collapses after the father is imprisoned by revolutionary forces. What makes this novel essential to any historical fiction set in Iran is its layered portrayal of religious minorities in Persian society. Iran has long been home to Jewish, Christian, Zoroastrian, and Muslim communities. Shiraz itself, one of Iran's most ancient cities, has deep Jewish historical roots. The novel explores fear, loyalty, survival, and the psychological fracture that occurs when a society transforms overnight. But it does something even more significant. It humanizes history. Instead of headlines, we see dinner tables. Instead of ideology, we see children. Instead of slogans, we see silence. And silence, in Iranian literature, often carries more weight than speech. This novel bridges private grief with public revolution, and it does so without flattening Iran into stereotype, which is critical because the most searched phrase, "What is life like during the Iranian Revolution?" cannot be answered in one sentence. It must be told through story, and that is exactly what historical fiction does best. If you've been waiting for the truly epic historical fiction rooted in classical Persia, it's coming. And trust me, you do not want to miss the final 3 books on this list. We've already taken an extraordinary journey across the tapestry of Iranian history, from Safavid carpet workshops to Qajar salons, from 1953 Tehran to revolutionary prisons, diaspora memory, and mythic echoes of pre-Islamic Persia. Now we enter the final stretch of this literary expedition, a deep dive into long-view historical fiction that not only entertains, but expands how we see Iran, Persia, culture, revolution, exile, and identity. Let's begin with a modern book that resonates with the longing, dislocation, and hope that so many Iranian families have lived through. 8. The Nights Are Quiet in Tehran, Shida Bezyar. Here's a novel that has been longlisted for the International Booker Prize and is already drawing attention as one of the best contemporary novels about Iranian history, exile, and family memory. The Nights Are Quiet in Tehran by Shida Bezyar tells a polyphonic, multi-generational story set across 4 decades, from the aftermath of the 1979 Iranian Revolution through the political turbulence of the 2000s. This is not only historical fiction about the Iranian Revolution, it's also a nuanced exploration of forced migration, diaspora identity, cultural loss, and intergenerational memory, as seen through the eyes of Behzad, Nahid, and their children. What makes this novel so profound and so resonant with readers searching for books about Iranian family history, exile from Iran, and political upheaval in Tehran is its lived experience quality. The family's flight to Germany and their back and forth between homeland and diaspora reflects what many Iranian families have experienced in recent decades: the pull of home, the ache of removal, and the quiet endurance of hope. This is a novel where revolution and resistance are not abstract political movements. They are lived in kitchens, in childhood memories, and in the weight of language itself. And importantly, this book expands the historical fiction set in Iran conversation beyond immediate post-revolution narratives into more subtle terrain: the the quiet nights that follow loud political upheavals, the lull after trauma, and the enduring desire to return to one's homeland. 9. Creation Gorvidal. Now we move back into ancient Persia. Creation, widely re-released in the past 25 years and rediscovered by modern readers, is a sprawling historical novel set in the 5th century BCE. It follows Cyrus Spitama, a fictional Persian diplomat and grandson of Zoroaster, as he traverses the Achaemenid Empire and meets philosophers like Confucius, Buddha, and the thinkers of classical Greece. This book is frequently recommended under Achaemenid Empire historical fiction, novels about Cyrus the Great, and Persian Empire books, and it richly deserves it. Vidal reconstructs ancient Persia not as an enemy of Greece, as Western textbooks sometimes do, but as an intellectual, administrative, and multicultural powerhouse. In Creation, you experience the Persian imperial roads, court politics, Zoroastrian religious debates, and cross-cultural diplomacy, vivid historical settings that many readers search for when they look for books set in ancient Persia. If you want a novel that makes you feel the sweep of empire, the philosophical currents of early civilization, and the complexity of Persian governance at the height of its power, this is one of the most ambitious and rewarding historical fictions out there. 10. The Mirror of My Heart, Dick Davis. Our final book is a different kind of historical fiction, a literary bridge between epic tradition and contemporary storytelling. The Mirror of My Heart is a modern retelling of stories from the Shahnameh, the Persian book of kings written by Ferdowsi around 1000 CE. This epic is the foundation of Persian mythology, stories of Rostam and Soreb, Zahak the Simurgh, and countless kings whose deeds shaped the imagination of Iran and Central Asia for centuries. This book is indispensable for anyone searching for Shahnameh retellings, Persian epic literature, or books inspired by Persian mythology. In retelling these ancient narratives for modern audiences, The Mirror of My Heart connects myth with meaning, showing how themes of fate versus choice, empire versus justice, and heroism versus tragedy still echo in historical fiction about Iran today. So let's take stock of the incredible journey these 10 historical fiction books across Iran and Persia have taken us on. We began in Safavid Persia, weaving carpets and negotiating power in the blood of flowers. We walked through the 1953 Tehran coup and Cold War tensions in the stationery shop of Tehran. We heard the clang of prison doors in The Prisoner of Tehran. We crossed into myth and legend in Girl, Serpent, Thorn. We witnessed the power of poetry and artistic rebellion in Song of a Captive Bird. We lived with exile, longing, and generational hope in the nights are quiet in Tehran. Then we leapt back to the era of Cyrus the Great and the Achaemenid Empire in Creation. And finally, we breathed in the mythic soul of Iran through The Mirror of My Heart and its reinterpretation of the Shahnameh. What connects these extraordinary books, despite their wide range of styles, eras, and narrative approaches, is something deeply human. History in Iranian literature is not just about dates and events. It is about memory. It is about home. It is about language. It is about identity. And above all, it is about storytelling. From cultural displacement and revolution to epic mythology and imperial worldviews, Iranian historical fiction teaches us the past is never truly past. It lives in families, in languages, in the way we remember the land we came from. Because historical fiction about Iran does not just tell stories, it preserves worlds, it carries legacies, and it invites us, the readers, into a conversation that transcends borders, time, and politics. Thank you for joining this deep dive into the best historical fiction books about Iran and Persia. Until next time, keep reading, keep questioning, and keep reshuffling your bookshelf with stories that matter.